Chapter 1. Natalie Evans didn't belong here. The chandeliers dripped with wealth, the marble floors shone beneath her scuffed boots, and the towering glass walls overlooked a city that had never felt more unreachable. She tugged at the strap of her paint-stained bag, shifting uncomfortably as the receptionist eyed her like she was an intruder. She was. Her fingers tightened around the business card in her hand. Leon Carter, CEO, bold letters embossed in gold, the kind of card only someone with too much money and too much arrogance would own. She shouldn't be here. But her landlord had given her 2 weeks to come up with rent, and her art wasn't selling fast enough to stop the eviction notice from hitting her door. So when a man in a tailored suit had approached her at the cafe last night with an offer she couldn't understand, let alone refuse, she'd taken the card. Now, she regretted it. Natalie Evans? The receptionist's tone was clipped. Mr. Carter will see you now. Swallowing, she followed the woman through a hallway lined with art worth more than her entire existence. This is a mistake. But it was too late to turn back. The office doors were sleek, black, and intimidating. They swung open silently, revealing a man who could command an entire room without saying a single word. Leon Carter didn't look up right away. He was behind his massive desk, a watch glinting on his wrist as he signed something with deliberate strokes. She took the moment to study him. Tall, dark-haired, expensive. His suit fit like it had been sewn onto his frame, his jaw sharp enough to cut. But it was his presence that stole the air from the room, the sheer force of power that radiated from him. He finally glanced up. Icy blue eyes locked onto her, assessing, calculating. Natalie Evans. His voice was deep, smooth, with the kind of control that sent a shiver down her spine. Sit, she hesitated. His brows lifted slightly, impatience flickering across his face. Natalie bit back a retort and sat across from him, her hands curling into fists on her lap. He watched her, silent, until the weight of his gaze became unbearable. "I don't know why I'm here," she said finally. A slow, knowing smirk tugged at his lips. "Yes, you do." Her pulse skittered. Leon leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "I need a wife, Miss Evans, and you need money." Her stomach dropped. "I'm not a prostitute," she said flatly. His smirk deepened. "I don't need one." Heat crept up her neck. "Then why?" "My grandfather's will requires me to be married within 6 months, or I lose everything." His tone was impassive, like he was discussing the weather. "You will marry me, stay for 1 year, play the role, and when it's over, you walk away with $5 million. Silence crashed between them. She stared at him, waiting for the punchline. It never came. "You're insane," she whispered. "I'm a businessman." His fingers tapped against the desk, eyes unwavering. "And I always get what I want." She shot to her feet. "Find someone else." Leon didn't move. "You don't have a choice." Her breath hitched. "Excuse me. I ran a background check." He said it so casually, like violating her privacy was just another part of his morning routine. "Your bank account is empty. Your rent is overdue. Your art isn't selling." His head tilted slightly. "You're desperate." Anger clawed up her throat. "You're a bastard," she snapped. His lips curled. "And you, Miss Evans, are out of options." Her fingers trembled at her sides. The money, the security, the chance to escape the drowning weight of her failing career. It was everything she needed, wrapped in a nightmare she wanted no part of. She hated him, hated that he was right, hated that she was actually considering it. Leon stood, rounding the desk with the confidence of a man who owned the world. When he stopped in front of her, her breath caught. "I don't need love. I don't need a real wife," he murmured. "I need someone who understands the terms." His voice dipped lower. 1 year. No emotions, just a contract. She swallowed hard. "And if I say no," Leon's expression didn't change. "You won't." Her heart pounded against her ribs because he was right. She was about to make the worst mistake of her life, and there was no way out. Chapter 2. Natalie stared at the piece of paper in front of her, her pulse hammering like a war drum. A marriage contract. Every line was neatly typed, every clause laid out in black and white. It was absurd, cold, a deal sealed with ink instead of emotion. She shouldn't be here. She shouldn't even be considering this. And yet, as Leon Carter sat across from her, his gaze locked onto hers with that infuriating patience, she knew there was no walking away. His words from yesterday still echoed in her head. "You don't have a choice." He was right. Her rent was due in 2 weeks. Her art wasn't selling fast enough to buy groceries, let alone keep a roof over her head. The thought of returning home, of proving everyone who doubted her right, made her stomach twist. $5 million. 1 year of her life. The numbers made her dizzy. Her fingers curled into fists on her lap. This is insane. Leon leaned back in his chair, unbothered. It's business. She exhaled sharply, pressing her palms against her thighs. And what exactly does this business arrangement entail? A flicker of amusement crossed his face. He reached for the contract and flipped to a page in the middle. Let's go over the key terms, shall we? His voice was infuriatingly smooth, like he was discussing stock options instead of a marriage. You will be my wife for 1 year, he began. In public, we will appear as a normal married couple. You will attend events with me, wear my ring, and fulfill the duties expected of my wife. Her jaw clenched. Duties? Leon's lips curled slightly, but he didn't take the bait. You will live with me, accompany me to social functions, and handle press obligations. Beyond that, you may continue your personal life as you wish. Her chest tightened, and in private, the air between them thickened. His gaze dropped briefly to her lips before meeting her eyes again. In private, he murmured, our relationship will be whatever we decide it to be. Her breath hitched. You mean, I won't force you into my bed, Natalie. His voice was even, but something dark flickered in his expression. But if you do end up there, it will be because you want to be there. Heat flooded her cheeks. She hated the way her body reacted to the way he said her name, to the quiet intensity in his voice. That won't happen, she snapped. A slow smirk curved his lips. If you say so. She ignored the way her pulse betrayed her. What about after the year is up? You will receive $5 million and our marriage will be annulled. Clean. Simple. She exhaled, trying to steady herself. And if I break the contract? His smirk vanished. You won't. She swallowed hard. But if I do? His fingers tapped against the desk, his expression cool but unreadable. If you leave before the year is up, you get nothing. Her stomach twisted. Nothing. No money. No security. No escape from the life she was barely holding together. She should say no. She should. But her hands were shaking as she reached for the pen. She felt his eyes on her, waiting, watching. 1 year. She could survive 1 year. She pressed the tip of the pen to paper and signed away her freedom. Chapter 3. Natalie stood in the doorway of Leon Carter's penthouse, gripping her bag so tightly that her knuckles turned white. This was it. Her new life as Mrs. Carter. The title felt foreign, surreal, and yet the weight of the ring on her finger was a cold, inescapable reality. Leon walked in ahead of her, not bothering to check if she followed. The place was exactly what she imagined, impossibly sleek, suffocatingly expensive, and as cold as the man who owned it. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering city, casting long shadows over the black and white marble floors. A massive fireplace stretched along one wall, but there was no warmth in it. Just like him. Your room is down the hall. Leon's deep voice cut through the silence, sending a shiver down her spine. You'll find everything you need inside. She turned toward him, her pulse pounding. Separate rooms? He gave her a slow, unreadable look. You expected otherwise? Heat rushed to her face. No, she muttered. Just clarifying. Leon smirked slightly. Good, I don't need my wife sneaking out in the middle of the night. Her teeth clenched. Why would I sneak out? Because that's what people do when they realize they've made a deal with the devil. A chill ran down her spine at how casually he said it. Before she could respond, he was already walking away, heading toward what she assumed was his bedroom. Get some sleep, Natalie. His voice was calm, controlled. But when he turned back, something dark lingered in his icy blue eyes. You belong to me now. The words sent an unexplainable thrill and fear through her veins. The door closed behind him. She exhaled shakily and turned toward her new bedroom. 1 year. She just had to survive 1 year. But deep down, she knew. Leon Carter was going to ruin her. Chapter 4. Natalie woke up to silence. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The bed was too soft, the sheets too smooth, the air too crisp, nothing like the cramped, noisy apartment she had left behind. Then reality hit. Leon Carter's wife. Her stomach twisted. She forced herself up, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. The guest room, her new room, was bigger than her entire old apartment. The walls were a soft ivory, the furniture sleek and modern, and the view from the massive window stretched across the city skyline. Luxurious, isolated, trapped. Shoving the thought aside, she glanced at the clock on the nightstand. 6:30 a.m. The one thing she could control right now? Cooking. Natalie had always loved making breakfast. It was comforting, grounding, familiar. And if she was stuck in this situation for a year, she might as well make herself useful. She made her way to the kitchen, stopping short when she took in the state-of-the-art appliances. This wasn't a kitchen, it was a chef's dream. Stainless steel counters gleamed under the soft morning light. The fridge was massive, stocked with everything imaginable. She tied her hair up and rolled up her sleeves. Fine, let's see if billionaires eat real food. 30 minutes later. The smell of coffee and fresh pancakes filled the penthouse. Natalie set the last plate down, stepping back to admire her work. Fluffy buttermilk pancakes, crispy bacon, scrambled eggs, fresh fruit, and, because she was feeling generous, freshly brewed coffee. Perfect. The sound of footsteps made her turn. Leon. He stood in the doorway, wearing dark slacks and an unbuttoned white dress shirt, his sleeves pushed up. His hair was slightly tousled, like he had just run a hand through it. He looked dangerously good. His eyes swept over the breakfast spread before landing on her. What is this? Natalie arched a brow, crossing her arms. It's called breakfast. Normal people eat it. He didn't move. For a moment, she thought he might actually reject it, like the idea of eating something homemade was beneath him. Then, without a word, he pulled out a chair and sat down. Natalie hesitated before pouring him coffee, setting it beside his plate. Leon picked up his fork, cutting into a pancake with precise, deliberate movements. She watched as he took a bite. Waited. His expression gave nothing away, but he kept eating, bite after bite, until his plate was nearly empty. Natalie couldn't hide her smug smile. "I'll take that as a compliment." Leon set his fork down, wiping his mouth with a linen napkin. Then he leaned back in his chair, eyes locked onto her. "You cooked for me." His voice was unreadable. She shrugged. "I cooked for myself. You just happened to benefit from it." A flicker of something passed through his gaze, something she couldn't place. Then, just as quickly, it was gone. "I have rules, Natalie." His voice was suddenly sharp, controlled. "You don't cook for me unless I ask you to." Her brows furrowed. "Excuse me?" "This isn't a real marriage," he continued. "I don't need you playing house." Irritation bubbled in her chest. "It's just breakfast." Leon stood, smoothing his sleeves down. "It's unnecessary. I don't do unnecessary things." Her fists clenched. He had eaten every bite of what she made, and now he was acting like it was a problem? "You're unbelievable." He smirked, but there was no humor in it. "You'll get used to it." Natalie took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. "If you don't want me to cook for you, fine." She grabbed her plate, taking it to the sink. "But next time, make your own damn coffee." She expected him to say something, to argue, to demand she follow his rules. Instead, when she turned back, he was already gone. Chapter 5. Natalie spent the rest of the morning trying to shake off the infuriating conversation with Leon. "You don't cook for me unless I ask you to." Who the hell did he think he was? She hadn't been trying to play house or win him over. She just liked cooking, and if she had to live here for a year, she was going to keep some sense of normalcy. Fine, he didn't want breakfast? Then he could starve. With that decision made, she grabbed her sketch pad and curled up on the balcony, letting the sun warm her skin as she started sketching. But no matter how hard she tried to focus, she kept thinking about Leon. The way he had silently eaten everything she made. The way his icy blue eyes had darkened when she told him to make his own damn coffee. The way his presence filled the entire penthouse even when he wasn't in the room. She groaned, shutting her sketchbook. This was a disaster. She needed to remember the rules. This was a contract. A business arrangement, not a marriage, not real. And she would do everything in her power to make sure it stayed that way. Leon Carter was losing his mind. He sat at his desk reviewing a contract that should have had his full attention, but instead his mind kept drifting back to the kitchen, to the way she looked standing there, barefoot in his penthouse, acting like she belonged. To the scent of coffee and fresh pancakes filling the space, a scent he hadn't realized was comforting until it was gone. Damn her. She was already breaking down the carefully structured world he lived in, and he couldn't afford that. He didn't do warmth. He didn't do attachments. He did control. And Natalie Evans was a complication he didn't need. His jaw clenched as he pressed the intercom. "Clear my schedule for the evening." His assistant hesitated. "But Mr. Carter, you have..." "Clear it. There was silence before the quiet reply. Yes, sir. Leon shut off the intercom and leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing. It was time to remind his wife exactly who was in control. Natalie had just finished a long, hot shower when she heard a knock at her door. She froze. Leon hadn't come near her all day. Why now? Wrapping herself in a silk robe, she hesitated before opening the door. Leon stood there, looking unreasonably good in a black dress shirt with the top button undone, his sleeves rolled up. His eyes raked over her slowly, deliberately. Get dressed, he said. We're going out. Natalie blinked. What? His jaw tightened. You heard me. Why? Because I said so. Her annoyance flared. That's not a reason. Leon exhaled, clearly not used to being questioned. We have an event to attend. You're my wife. Act like it, she crossed her arms. And if I don't feel like going? Leon's lips curled into a smirk, a dangerous, knowing smirk. Then I'll carry you there myself. Her breath caught. Bastard. She narrowed her eyes, holding his gaze. Fine, she bit out. But if you so much as try to tell me what to wear, I'll show up in my pajamas. For the first time that day, Leon chuckled. Do whatever you want, Mrs. Carter, he said smoothly. Just be ready in 20 minutes. And just like that, he turned and walked away. Natalie let out a slow breath, heart pounding. 1 year, she reminded herself, she just had to survive 1 year. Chapter 6. Natalie had exactly 20 minutes to get ready. She didn't bother picking something safe or elegant. If Leon wanted her to play the role of his perfect wife, she was going to make sure he regretted dragging her into this. She chose a black silk dress, one that hugged her body just enough to make a statement. It had a high slit up one side, the kind that would make every single pair of eyes in the room snap to her. Let him deal with that. Her makeup was soft but sultry, just enough to make an impact. And as she slipped into a pair of heels, she caught her reflection in the mirror. She looked like a woman who belonged in his world, but she wasn't. She was just pretending. A sharp knock on her door made her jump. Time's up, Mrs. Carter. Her stomach tightened at the sound of his voice, deep, commanding, unbothered. She took a breath and opened the door. Leon's gaze dropped instantly. For a fraction of a second, so quick she almost missed it, his eyes darkened. Then, just as quickly, his expression became unreadable. You're trying to test me, he said smoothly. Natalie smirked. Is it working? His jaw flexed. He didn't answer. Instead, he simply extended his arm. Shall we? She hesitated. Then, with an exaggerated sigh, she placed her hand in his. His grip was warm, firm, possessive. And for the first time, as they walked toward the waiting car, Natalie felt like she was walking into a trap. She was playing with fire, and she didn't even realize it. The moment she stepped into the car, Leon's patience stretched thin. The silk of her dress clung to her curves, the high slit revealing just enough skin to tempt. She had done this on purpose, to provoke him, and it was working. The problem was, Natalie didn't understand who she was provoking. She wasn't ready for the way his mind worked. She wasn't ready for him. The car pulled up to the event, a high-profile charity gala filled with the city's wealthiest elite. The moment they stepped inside, eyes turned toward them. Leon ignored them all. His focus remained on the woman beside him, his wife. He leaned in, his lips brushing against her ear. You wanted my attention, sweetheart, he murmured. Now you have it. Natalie shivered. But before she could say anything, they were greeted by a group of business associates. Leon's grip on her waist tightened. Smile, he ordered softly. Her lips curved into a defiant smirk. And just like that, the game began. She had expected the night to be miserable. Instead, it was a battlefield. Leon played his role perfectly, the powerful billionaire with a stunning wife at his side. He introduced her to people with effortless charm, his hand never leaving her waist, his voice calm and commanding. But what infuriated her the most was how easily he controlled the situation. Like he owned her. Like she was just another acquisition. By the time dinner was served, she was boiling, and then it got worse. A woman approached their table, her dress clinging to her body, her red lips curved into a knowing smile. Leon, she purred, touching his shoulder. It's been too long, Natalie stiffened. Leon's expression didn't change. Vanessa. The woman's gaze flickered to Natalie, assessing her like she was competition, and suddenly Natalie understood this was an ex. Before she could stop herself, she did something reckless. She turned to Leon with a sweet, fake smile, leaned in, and whispered, just loud enough for Vanessa to hear, Who is she, darling? Leon stilled. For the first time all night, she had caught him off guard. Vanessa's expression darkened, and Natalie? She just took a slow sip of her champagne, pretending not to notice the storm brewing beside her. Let the game continue. Chapter 8. If Leon Carter thought he could rattle her, he was in for a rude awakening. Natalie refused to let him have the upper hand, so she decided to push back. Hard. And what better way than with a night out? Without him. She picked up her phone and sent a message to her two closest friends, Mia and Leela. Natalie, girls' night, tonight. I need alcohol and distractions. Within seconds, Mia responded. Mia, did the devil himself finally push you over the edge? Leela, took him long enough. Natalie smirked. Oh, Leon wanted to play games? Fine, but she would set the rules this time. Later that evening, she slipped into a red dress. Not just any red dress, the kind of dress that would make Leon lose his damn mind. Sleek, backless, with a plunging neckline that left very little to the imagination. Perfect. She took one last look in the mirror and grabbed her purse. Just as she reached the door, a deep voice stopped her. Going somewhere? She flinched. Leon leaned against the doorframe of his home office, watching her. His gaze slowly traveled down her body. His jaw tightened. Natalie smirked. Yes. His eyes darkened. With who? Mia and Lila. She slipped on her heels. Not that it's any of your business. Leon took a slow, measured step forward. You're my wife. She arched a brow. Only on paper. His lips curled, but there was nothing amused about it. Natalie, he warned. She grabbed her clutch. Relax, darling. I'll be home before midnight. Maybe. Then she walked out, without waiting for his response. The moment she stepped inside the VIP section, she knew she had made the right decision. The music was loud, the energy was wild, the drinks were strong. She downed a shot, letting the burn of tequila fuel her defiance. This was freedom. Mia leaned in. Does Leon know you're here? Natalie smirked. Oh, he knows. Lila grinned. And how mad is he? Natalie lifted her second shot. We'll find out soon enough. They clinked glasses, laughing. For the first time in weeks, Natalie felt alive. She danced. She laughed. She let herself forget. Forget the contract. Forget Leon. Forget the way he made her feel like she was drowning in him. Until a familiar chill ran down her spine. A presence. Commanding. Unyielding. She stopped moving. Slowly she turned. And there he was. Leon Carter. Standing at the edge of the VIP section. Dark suit. Icy blue eyes locked onto her. Jaw clenched. Hands in his pockets. But his entire body was rigid. Furious. Mia whistled. Uh-oh. Lila whispered, You're so dead. Natalie's heart slammed against her ribs, but she refused to back down. She wanted to push him? Fine. She turned toward the nearest guy, a tall, attractive stranger, and smiled. The man leaned in. Hey, beautiful. Want to dance? Before she could answer, a strong hand clamped onto her wrist. She gasped as Leon pulled her back against his chest. The stranger took one look at Leon's expression and practically ran. Natalie, Leon murmured against her ear, his voice low. Dangerous. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Chapter 9. The moment Leon's grip tightened around her wrist, Natalie knew she had gone too far. The air inside the car was thick, charged, dangerous. He didn't say a word during the ride back to the penthouse, but his silence was a warning. A promise. The moment the car stopped in front of the towering glass building, he got out without a word. She should have felt victorious. She had pushed him. She had made him lose control. But as she followed him inside the penthouse, her heart pounded for an entirely different reason. Because the moment that door clicked shut behind them, Leon Carter was done playing. The second the door locked, he turned. Natalie was standing there, her arms crossed, trying to act unfazed, like she hadn't just tempted fate, like she hadn't just tested his limits. She had no idea. Slowly, he stalked toward her. She didn't move, didn't flinch. But her breathing hitched. Good. You think you can provoke me and walk away unscathed? He murmured, stopping inches from her. Her lips parted, but no words came out. He reached up, trailing his fingers down her bare arm. She shivered. You were reckless tonight, Mrs. Carter. His voice was low, smooth, dangerous. You disobeyed me. Natalie's jaw clenched. You don't own me. Leon's lips curled. Oh, sweetheart. He leaned in, his breath hot against her ear. That's where you're wrong. Before she could react, he moved. One moment, she was standing in defiance. The next, she was bent over the arm of the leather couch, her wrists pinned behind her back. She let out a sharp gasp, her body thrumming with adrenaline. Leon, you wanted my attention? He pressed against her, his grip firm but controlled. Now you have it. Her breath hitched. Damn him. The silk of her dress rose as his palm skimmed up her thigh. A slow, measured touch. Natalie's pulse pounded. "You don't get to run off and act like my rules don't apply to you," he murmured. His free hand slid down her back, and then the first sharp slap landed. Natalie let out a shocked gasp, heat blooming across her skin. She twisted, but he held her firm. "You don't get to challenge me and walk away without consequences." Another spank. Harder this time. Natalie bit her lip, her body betraying her. Her pulse skittered. Leon leaned in, voice dark, amused. "Are you learning, sweetheart?" She hated how her body reacted to him. Hated how she could still feel the heat of his palm, the dominance in his touch. Hated how he made her feel alive. She turned her head, eyes blazing. "You're a bastard." His chuckle was low, dark, and "you're a brat." Another sharp smack. Her breath hitched. Leon let his palm rest on the curve of her hip, his fingers pressing possessively into her skin. "You belong to me, Natalie." His voice was softer now, more dangerous. "And I don't share." Her heart pounded. She should have been afraid. She should have fought him. But instead, she ached in a way she wasn't ready to admit. Leon dragged his fingers slowly up her thigh, teasing, controlling. Her body betrayed her. "Say it," he murmured, his grip tightening. "Say you're mine." Natalie swallowed hard. She should fight, should resist. But in that moment, she couldn't. Her voice came out shaky, defiant. "Go to hell, Leon." His smirk darkened. "Then he'll take you with me." And with that, he lifted her, carried her to his bedroom. Chapter 10. The second the bedroom door slammed shut, Natalie knew she was in trouble. Leon had snapped. She had pushed him to his limit, and now she was about to pay the price. He didn't speak, didn't hesitate, didn't give her a chance to escape. Instead, he carried her straight to the bed, placing her down with a controlled, terrifying precision. His body hovered over hers, his strong hands pinning her wrists above her head. Her breath came fast, her heart slamming against her ribs. "You're done testing me, Natalie." His voice was low, dark, and completely in control. She swallowed hard, her defiance wavering. "You don't control me," she whispered. His lips curled. "That's cute," he murmured. And then he kissed her. Hard. Possessive. The kind of kiss that stole the air from her lungs, that burned through every wall she had left. His grip on her tightened when she whimpered against his mouth. "You act like you don't want this," he muttered, his lips dragging down her throat. She trembled. Damn him. Damn him for knowing exactly what he was doing to her. "You belong to me, sweetheart." His breath was hot against her skin. She shivered. His teeth grazed her collarbone. Her pulse skipped. No, she couldn't let him win. She fought against his grip, her body thrumming with frustration, confusion, desire. "Let me go," she dared. Leon's grip tightened. "You don't want that." Her chest rose and fell rapidly. His fingers skimmed down her body, teasing, claiming, controlling. She whimpered. Leon's smirk deepened. "There you go," he murmured. His lips brushed over hers again, slower this time, more deliberate. "Now tell me," he whispered. "Are you still going to fight me?" Her entire body burned. Her mind screamed yes. Her body begged no. And Leon? He was patient, waiting, daring her. Natalie took a slow, shaky breath. And then she did the unthinkable. She arched into him. Her lips brushed against his, and whispered, "Not tonight." Leon Carter had never lost control, until this moment. Natalie had fought him every step of the way, defied him, tempted him, dared him. And now she had surrendered. Not fully, not yet. But enough to drive him over the edge. His hand tightened around her waist, keeping her pressed beneath him. She had no idea what she had just unleashed. "You should have kept fighting, sweetheart," he murmured against her lips. Her breath hitched. Too late now. Leon smirked, and took exactly what was his. Chapter 11. The morning light filtered through the massive windows, casting a warm glow across the bedroom. Natalie blinked, slowly becoming aware of where she was, and who she was with. A firm, warm arm was draped over her waist, holding her firmly in place. Leon. Her pulse skipped as the memories of last night slammed into her. The fight, the tension, the way he had finally broken her. She swallowed hard, staring at the ceiling. What had she done? Carefully, she tried to shift away, only to be pulled back. Leon let out a deep, half-awake groan, his grip tightening. "Don't." His voice was husky, rough from sleep. Her breath hitched. "You don't get to run," he murmured, pressing a slow kiss to her shoulder. Her entire body betrayed her. Heat pooled in her stomach. No, she couldn't let this happen. Couldn't let him win. Natalie took a deep breath and forced herself to push against his grip. "Let me go," she whispered. Leon's grip loosened, but not fully. His blue eyes flickered open, dangerous, unreadable. "Regretting something, sweetheart?" Her jaw clenched. "You and I both know last night shouldn't have happened." Leon chuckled, rolling onto his side, facing her. "Then why did it?" Her stomach twisted. Damn him. Damn his smugness, his control, his ability to pull her apart with just a look. She forced herself to sit up, clutching the sheets around her. "This changes nothing," she muttered. Leon moved too fast. Before she could react, he grabbed her wrist, pulling her back down beneath him. She let out a small gasp as he hovered over her, his weight, his heat, his presence overwhelming. His hand brushed against her cheek. "This changes everything," he corrected smoothly. Her heart pounded. "You can fight it, Natalie," he murmured, his lips ghosting over hers. "But we both know you're mine now." A shiver ran down her spine. She hated how right he was. Hated how her body craved more of him. Hated how she was already losing this war. "Tell me you don't want this," Leon whispered, his blue eyes burning into her. She opened her mouth to lie, but no words came out, because she couldn't. She couldn't lie. And Leon knew it. His smirk deepened. "That's what I thought." And just like that, he kissed her again. Hard, possessive, unforgiving. And she let him. Leon Carter had never lost control. Not in business, not in life, not with any woman. Until Natalie, until her defiance, her stubbornness, her reckless need to fight him had broken something in him. She was his. And now she had no way out. As he kissed her, hard and slow, he could feel the war inside her, the way she wanted to fight, and the way her body refused to. His hands skimmed down her sides, pressing her further beneath him. "Say it," he murmured against her lips. "Say what?" she whispered breathlessly. "That you're mine." She froze. Her lips parted, but she still refused to say it. Leon smirked. Fine. He had all the time in the world to make her admit it, because there was no escaping him now. Chapter 12. The next morning, Natalie woke up alone. For a brief, delirious moment, she thought maybe, just maybe, last night had been a dream. But the soreness in her body, the faint scent of Leon's cologne on her skin, and the chaotic mess of sheets told her otherwise. Her stomach twisted. She had let him win. She had given in. And now, she had no idea how to undo it. She groaned, running a hand over her face. This was supposed to be fake, a contract, a business arrangement. Not this. Not whatever the hell this was turning into. Determined, she threw on a robe and stormed out of the bedroom, intent on finding Leon and setting boundaries. But the moment she stepped into the living room, she froze. Leon was sitting at the breakfast table, calm, composed, and completely unbothered, like nothing had happened, like he hadn't completely wrecked her last night. His blue eyes flickered up the second she stepped into the room. Natalie's pulse skittered. Damn him. "Good morning, Mrs. Carter." His voice was smooth, knowing. She clenched her jaw. "Don't call me that." Leon's lips curved into a dangerous smirk. "What should I call you then?" She crossed her arms. "My name works just fine." He hummed in amusement, sipping his coffee. Natalie wanted to strangle him. She marched forward, gripping the back of the chair across from him. "We need to talk." Leon set his coffee down, his expression unreadable. "About?" She exhaled sharply. "Last night." "Was inevitable," he interrupted smoothly. Her fingers tightened around the chair. "Last night was a mistake," she snapped. Leon tilted his head, studying her. Then, in one slow, infuriating move, he leaned back in his chair, resting an arm along the back. "That's interesting," he murmured, "because I remember you begging for more." Her entire face burned. She wanted to throw something at him. "You arrogant." "Careful, sweetheart." He smirked, watching her squirm. "You keep blushing like that, and I'll start thinking you enjoyed yourself." Her heart slammed against her ribs. She needed to regain control. She lifted her chin. "It won't happen again." Leon raised an eyebrow. She hated how he looked at her, like he already knew she was lying. "Is that so?" he murmured, standing. Natalie's breath hitched as he walked around the table, stopping inches from her. The air thickened. She refused to back away. She refused to let him win again. Leon reached out, trailing a slow, infuriating finger down her arm. Her skin betrayed her. Goosebumps. A shiver. "Damn it. You can tell yourself whatever you want, Natalie." His voice was low, confident, but you and I both know the truth. Her throat went dry. "And what's that?" Leon leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. "You belong to me now." Her knees almost buckled. Before she could respond, he stepped back, leaving her standing there, completely unraveling. And the worst part? She wasn't sure she wanted to fight him anymore. Leon Carter had won. And he knew it. He watched as Natalie fought herself, as she desperately tried to regain control, tried to pretend she wasn't already his. Too late, sweetheart. She could deny it all she wanted. But last night she had broken, and now she was his to ruin. He smirked, sipping his coffee, watching her flustered state with satisfaction. Pack a bag, he said smoothly. Natalie blinked, thrown off. What? We're leaving tonight. She frowned. Leaving where? Leon checked his watch. I have business in Paris, and as my wife, you'll be coming with me. Her jaw dropped. I never agreed to that. Leon's smirk deepened. You agreed the moment you signed the contract, sweetheart. She gaped at him. You can fight me all you want, Natalie, he murmured, brushing a finger under her chin. But I always get what I want. Her eyes darkened with fury. And God, he loved it. Chapter 13. Leon Carter wasn't a man who chased. He didn't beg. He didn't plead. He took. And now, as the private jet soared through the night sky, slicing through the clouds toward Paris, he watched his wife, his defiant, infuriating, utterly irresistible wife, fidget in her seat, arms crossed, eyes burning with frustration. She had spent the last 2 hours refusing to look at him. But Leon? He hadn't stopped watching her. She could pretend she wasn't affected, that last night hadn't changed everything between them, but he saw the truth, the tension in her shoulders, the way she clenched her jaw when he spoke, the way her breath hitched when he moved too close. She felt it, too, and that meant he had already won. The flight attendant appeared beside them, offering him a fresh glass of bourbon. He took it without looking away from Natalie, savoring the way she bristled under his gaze. You're sulking, he mused, taking a sip. Her head snapped toward him. I am not sulking, Leon smirked. Then what would you call it? She exhaled sharply. You forced me to come on this trip. His smirk didn't waver. I'm your husband, on paper. His eyes darkened. Paper or not, it's real enough to everyone else. She narrowed her gaze. You don't own me, Leon. He tilted his head, setting his drink down. That's where you're wrong, sweetheart. He leaned in, dropping his voice to a dangerous whisper. I own every part of you. Her breath hitched, and there it was. The reaction she tried so hard to suppress. Leon let the silence stretch, let her feel the weight of his words before pulling back, satisfied. She wanted to play games? Fine, but she was going to lose. The car ride from the airport was quiet, too quiet. Leon could feel the storm brewing beside him, the unspoken battle raging beneath Natalie's stubborn silence. He let it simmer. Let her think she had the upper hand. Let her believe she was still in control. But the moment they arrived at the penthouse suite, he saw her defiance falter. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a breathtaking view of the Eiffel Tower, glittering in the night. Gold chandeliers bathed the suite in a soft, luxurious glow. Everything was expensive, elegant, suffocatingly intimate. There was only one bed. Natalie stiffened. You expect me to sleep here? She demanded, whirling toward him. Leon raised an eyebrow. Where else? Her jaw clenched. I want my own room. His smirk deepened. Not happening. Her eyes flashed with fury. You can't force me to share a bed with you. Leon took a slow step forward, drinking in her anger like a fucking drug. He reached up, trailing a single finger along the delicate curve of her jaw. Natalie froze. You didn't seem to mind sharing last night, he murmured. Her breathing stuttered. He smirked. Checkmate. Natalie ripped away from him, her cheeks flushed. You're insufferable. And you're still standing in my bedroom, he pointed out, her fists clenched. I hate you. Leon chuckled, stepping even closer. No, you don't. She stilled. He let the silence stretch, watching her fight the truth. And then, just to prove his point, he reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. You want to run, he whispered, voice dark, velvety, but you can't. Her pulse skittered. His fingers skimmed down her throat, tracing the frantic beat of her pulse. You're mine. Sweetheart, he murmured. You just haven't accepted it yet. Natalie snapped. Before he could react, she shoved him. Hard. Leon barely stumbled, but the fire in her eyes made his blood fucking burn. You think you've won? She hissed. You think dragging me here and making me share a bed with you means you'll fall at your feet? Leon's lips curled. I don't need you to fall at my feet, Natalie. He took a step forward, crowding her. She stepped back until she hit the edge of the bed. He leaned down, his blue eyes dark, unreadable. I just need you to fall, period. Her breath caught. Leon smirked. Then, without another word, he turned and walked into the bathroom, leaving her standing there, breathless and furious. He had pushed her, and soon she was going to break. Natalie lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Leon was next to her, too close, too warm, too much. She had kept her back turned, refusing to acknowledge him. But sleep refused to come. Because every part of her was aware of him, the way his breathing was slow, controlled, the way the sheets barely separated them, the way her body still ached from his touch. She was losing. She could feel it. And worst of all, she didn't know if she wanted to stop it anymore. This was dangerous. He was dangerous. But maybe, so was she. Her body, claiming, owning, punishing. Say it, he growled against her skin. Natalie arched into him, gasping. Say it, sweetheart. Her fingers dug into his back. And finally, she shattered. I want you, Leon smirked. Good girl. And then he took exactly what was his. Chapter 15. The soft golden light of morning filtered through the penthouse windows, casting a warm glow across the rumpled sheets and the man sleeping beside her. Leon. His arm was draped over her waist, his breathing deep and even, completely at ease, as if he hadn't just spent the night ruining her, as if he hadn't just shattered every wall she had left. Natalie stared at the ceiling, reality crashing over her like a tidal wave. This was never supposed to happen. Their marriage was supposed to be a contract, a business transaction. Not this. Not the way he looked at her. Not the way she melted beneath him. Not the way she had finally given in. Her chest tightened, a deep, terrifying realization settling into her bones. She had lost completely. And now, there was no turning back. Leon Carter woke up to an empty bed. The moment his hand met cold sheets, his eyes snapped open. He turned, but she was gone. His jaw clenched. So that's how she wanted to play this. She thought she could run, thought she could pretend last night didn't change everything. She was wrong. Leon threw the covers back, rising to his feet. He was calm, composed, but inside, a dangerous fire burned. Natalie Evans had pushed him from the start. She had defied him, fought him, tempted him. But last night she had broken. Last night she had whispered his name like a prayer, clung to him like he was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. And now, she wanted to pretend it didn't happen? Not a chance. Leon dressed swiftly, his movements sharp and precise. By the time he stepped into the penthouse living room, he found her standing by the balcony, arms wrapped around herself. She didn't turn, didn't acknowledge his presence, but he could feel it. The tension, the awareness. She knew he was here. She was just afraid to face him. Leon smirked, moving toward her with measured steps. You're up early, he murmured. Natalie stiffened. Couldn't sleep. Liar. Her breath hitched. Leon reached for her, his fingers brushing against her arm, barely touching her, and still she shivered. Perfect. You were gone when I woke up, he murmured, his voice low, controlled. Running away, sweetheart? Her jaw clenched. Last night was a mistake, she said, voice tight. Leon chuckled. A mistake? She turned then, her eyes burning. Yes, Leon studied her, the way she was desperately trying to convince herself. Then, slowly, he reached out, grabbing her chin, tilting her face up to his. Her breath stuttered. Leon smirked. Then why are you shaking? She froze. He leaned in, his lips brushing against her ear. You can lie to yourself all you want, sweetheart, he murmured. But you'll never lie to me. Her eyes darkened. You're impossible. And you, he smirked, brushing his lips down her jaw, are mine. Her fingers clenched into fists. I hate you, she whispered. Leon grinned, pulling back just enough to drink in the fire in her eyes. No, you don't. And then, before she could react, he captured her lips in a kiss. Hard, possessive, unforgiving. And this time, she didn't fight it. She let herself fall. Chapter 16. She let herself fall. That was the part that scared her the most, because the moment Leon's lips crushed against hers, she didn't resist. She didn't fight. She gave in. And when he wrapped his arms around her, pulling her flush against him, her body responded like it had been waiting for this, like she had always been meant to be here. The realization was terrifying, because if she wasn't careful, Leon Carter would be the one thing she couldn't walk away from. And that would destroy her. She pulled back, her breath coming in short, uneven gasps. Leon, don't, he murmured, his thumb brushing over her swollen lips. Don't overthink this, sweetheart. Her heart slammed against her ribs. I can't just... Yes, you can. His blue eyes burned into hers. You already have. Her fingers trembled against his chest. Tell me you don't want this, he said, his voice low, velvety. Dangerous. Tell me you don't need me. Tell me you can still walk away. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Because she couldn't. Leon smirked. Triumphant, that's what I thought. Her stomach twisted. This was too much. She needed space, needed to breathe. So she did the only thing she could. She turned and walked away. She expected him to stop her. He didn't. And that was even more terrifying, because Leon Carter never let her walk away, not unless he had already planned his next move. She was running again. He let her go. For now, because he already knew the truth. She was his. She just wasn't ready to admit it yet. But soon, she wouldn't have a choice. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. The voice on the other end picked up instantly. Sir? Change the plans, Leon said smoothly, watching the bedroom door she had just disappeared behind. I want the contract amended. A pause. Amended how? Leon's lips curled. Make it permanent. Chapter 17. Paris was suffocating. Or maybe it wasn't the city. Maybe it was him, Leon. His presence, his control, his unshakable belief that she belonged to him. That belief had buried itself under her skin, wrapped around her like an invisible chain. And the worst part, she wasn't sure she wanted to escape. So she spent the day avoiding him, lingering in the balcony, wandering the suite, pretending she wasn't thinking about the way he kissed her. The way he took his time breaking her down. She had almost convinced herself she was getting a break from his relentless pursuit, until she walked into the living room and froze, because standing there in a black, skin-tight dress, her perfect manicured fingers resting on Leon's arm like she belonged there, was Vanessa, Leon's ex. Leon saw the moment Natalie snapped. The moment she walked in, took in the sight of Vanessa, and went completely still. Good. Let her feel it. Let her see what it meant to claim something. Vanessa's voice was smooth, sultry, deliberate. Leon, darling, she purred, you should have told me you were in Paris. I would have made time for you. His expression didn't change. I didn't see the need, she pouted. That hurts me, you know. We were something special once. The moment those words left her mouth, he felt Natalie's energy shift. And that's when he moved, with purpose, with absolute undeniable possession. He turned, walking straight to his wife. Natalie lifted her chin, her arms crossed, her gorgeous, furious brown eyes locked onto him like she was daring him to explain. So he didn't. He just grabbed her, pulled her into his arms, and kissed her. Right in front of Vanessa, right in front of the past. His lips crushed against hers, his hands sliding up her waist, gripping her tight, making damn sure she felt exactly what she did to him. Natalie gasped against his mouth, her body momentarily stiff before she melted, before she kissed him back, before she grabbed his collar, pulling him closer, staking her own damn claim. By the time he pulled back, Natalie's lips were swollen, her breathing uneven, her eyes dark with something she couldn't hide anymore. And Vanessa looked wrecked, exactly as he intended. She was fuming. Not at Leon, at Vanessa, because this woman had the audacity to waltz into the penthouse, touching her husband, acting like she mattered. And that was not going to happen. So the moment Leon stepped back, his eyes flashing with silent victory, Natalie turned to Vanessa with a slow, lethal smile. You must be Vanessa, she said sweetly. Vanessa blinked, clearly thrown off by her sudden shift. And you must be Natalie, she countered, her lips curling slightly. The woman was testing her. Natalie smirked. Mrs. Carter, actually. Vanessa's eyes darkened. Oh, she hated that. Good. Natalie tilted her head, playing innocent. It's funny, really. I didn't realize Leon kept in touch with his leftovers. Vanessa's expression cracked. Leon chuckled, low and amused. Natalie wasn't done. She took a slow step closer, lowering her voice just enough for Vanessa to feel the threat beneath the words. I don't share, she murmured, sweet, soft, deadly. So if you were planning on reminiscing about the past, I suggest you do it somewhere far away from my husband. Vanessa's mouth parted slightly, her eyes flicking to Leon. But he just smirked, his arm wrapping around Natalie's waist, pulling her against him. Vanessa stiffened. Well, she muttered, forcing a smile, I can see I'm not needed here. She turned, walking out with as much dignity as she could salvage. The moment the door clicked shut, Leon spun Natalie around, and before she could say another word, he kissed her again. This time, it wasn't about proving a point. This time, it was only for them. Natalie grabbed his collar, pulling him deeper, matching his fire with her own. By the time they pulled apart, she was breathless, wrecked. And Leon? Leon looked victorious. Careful, sweetheart, he murmured against her lips. You almost sounded jealous. Natalie bit his lip. Jealous? she whispered. No, Leon, I just wanted her to know. Her nails dragged down his chest. If anyone touches what's mine, I'll rip them apart. Leon's eyes darkened, and that's when he lifted her, carried her to the bedroom, and reminded her exactly who she belonged to. Chapter 18. Love was not part of the contract. It was never supposed to be real. But as Natalie lay in bed, her body tangled with Leon's, her heart pounding too fast, too hard, she knew. She was completely, irreversibly ruined, because somewhere between the fights, the fire, the war between them, she had fallen. And now, there was no way out. Leon stirred beside her, his strong arm draped across her waist, his body warm and unyielding. She tried to shift away, but he tightened his grip. Stay, he murmured, his voice deep and husky from sleep. Natalie froze, because Leon never asked. Leon took, but now, in the quiet of the morning, he wasn't taking. He was holding, keeping her, like he already knew, like he had been waiting for her to catch up. Her chest tightened. This was dangerous. This was real. And real meant she could lose him. She swallowed hard, closing her eyes. Not yet. Not yet. But her heart had already surrendered. Leon had been waiting for her to realize it, waiting for her to accept it. Because no matter how much she fought him, no matter how many times she had tried to escape, tried to deny it, she was his, and he was hers. He had known it for weeks, known it when she had first defied him, when she had tested his control, when she had stood in front of Vanessa, fearless, claiming him like she was born to be his queen. Leon Carter didn't love. Love was weakness. Love was uncontrollable. But this woman? She had taken him apart without even trying, and now, as she lay beside him, silent, overthinking, fighting herself once again, Leon knew. It was time to make her admit it. He opened his eyes, shifting until he was hovering over her, trapping her beneath him. Her eyes snapped open, widening slightly. Leon, say it, he murmured. Her breath hitched. Say what? His lips brushed against hers, teasing, relentless. That you love me. Natalie froze. Her entire body stiffened. Leon smirked. You do, he whispered against her lips. You just don't want to admit it. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Leon, you love me, sweetheart, he cut in, completely sure. She shook her head. Say it, Natalie. His hand skimmed down her body, a slow, dangerous tease. Her breath stuttered. You can fight it all you want, he murmured, pressing hot kisses down her throat, but we both know you're mine. Her fingers curled into his shoulders. Say it, he whispered against her skin. Her heart was pounding. Her mind screamed no, but her heart had already given in. And when he looked at her like that, like she was the only thing that had ever mattered, she shattered. I love you, she whispered, the words breaking out of her like a confession, a plea, a surrender. Leon stilled, and then he kissed her, hard, deep, completely unforgiving, like he had been waiting for this moment all along, like he had known from the start. By the time he pulled away, his blue eyes burned with something even darker, even deeper than desire. Possession, victory, love. You're mine, he murmured against her lips. Natalie smirked. Then prove it. And he did. All damn night! Chapter 19. Loving Leon Carter was dangerous, but leaving him? Impossible. Natalie lay tangled in the sheets, her body sore, her lips still swollen from his relentless claiming. She had said the words, I love you. And in return, Leon had spent the entire night proving that she belonged to him. His touches, his whispers against her skin, the way he had destroyed every last bit of her resistance. Now there was no war left to fight because she was his. And even worse, she didn't want to be anywhere else. She turned her head, watching him as he slept beside her. Leon Carter, the man who had forced her into a contract, the man who had tormented her, controlled her, broken every single rule she had made for herself. And now, he was the only thing she couldn't live without. Her heart twisted. Because what if she lost him? What if she had given him everything, only for him to walk away in the end? As if sensing her thoughts, Leon's hand moved beneath the sheets, pulling her against him. She stiffened, but he didn't let go. Stop thinking, he murmured, his voice thick with sleep. Her breath caught. I'm not thinking. His lips curved. Liar. His eyes opened slowly, piercing through her. And then, he smirked. You love me. Natalie flushed. Don't get used to it, she muttered. Leon chuckled, rolling on top of her, pinning her beneath him. Too late, sweetheart. His lips skimmed her jaw, teasing, taking his time. You love me, he repeated, relishing the words. Natalie sighed. You're insufferable, and you're stuck with me. Her heart skipped because he said it like a promise, like there was never any chance of him leaving. She hesitated, her fingers brushing against his bare chest. "Leon," she whispered. Something in his eyes shifted, softer, more dangerous than anything he had ever said to her. "You're mine now," he murmured. Natalie swallowed hard. "Say it." Her lips parted. "You're mine," he whispered, brushing his lips against hers, and when she whispered it back, he devoured her all over again. Leon had won. Not just the fight, not just the game, but her. She was his now. No more running, no more fighting, and he would never let her go. As she lay in his arms, still breathless from his touch, from his relentless proof that she was his, he finally said the words that had been trapped in his chest since the moment he met her. "I love you too." Natalie froze. Then, slowly, she lifted her head, searching his face. "You do?" she whispered, like she didn't believe it. Like she thought she was the only one who had fallen. Leon smirked. "I always have." Her breath hitched. "Then why didn't you?" "Because I wanted you to admit it first." Her jaw dropped. "You're an ass, and yet you're in my bed." She rolled her eyes, but her cheeks flushed. Leon grinned, and then, before she could argue, before she could question what this meant, he kissed her. Slow, deep, final, because this was forever, and she was never getting away. Not now, not ever. Chapter 20. Paris had changed everything. There was no more war, no more denying what had been building between them since the beginning. She loved Leon Carter, and worst of all, she trusted him, even when he was infuriating, possessive, controlling, even when he drove her insane. She belonged to him now, and he knew it. So when Leon insisted she get dressed for a surprise, she didn't argue, much. But now, standing in front of a private chateau, tucked away in the Parisian countryside, surrounded by candlelight and soft music, she had one question. "Leon," she said slowly, watching him lead her through the grand doors. "What the hell is this?" His lips curved. "You'll see." She narrowed her eyes. "You're not giving me a choice, are you?" Leon chuckled. When have I ever? She should have been annoyed. Instead, her stomach fluttered, because Leon Carter had never been the type to do romance, which meant this was something more. Something real. She followed him inside. And then she froze, because standing at the end of the long candlelit hall was a man in a suit, a priest. Her heart stopped. "No, no way." Her eyes snapped to Leon. "You have got to be joking." His smirk deepened. "Marry me." Her entire body locked up. "What?" Leon took another step closer. "You heard me, sweetheart." He reached for her hand, tracing slow circles against her skin. "Marry me. For real this time." Her stomach twisted. She swallowed hard. "We already are." "Legally?" "Yes." His blue eyes burned into hers. "But I don't want a contract anymore, Natalie." His voice was low, dangerous. "I want you." She stared at him, heart hammering. "You're serious." Leon smirked. "When am I not?" She opened her mouth, ready to argue, ready to fight. Then she saw it, the way he was looking at her. Not as his possession, not as a contractual obligation, but as his future, his wife. And just like that, the war was over. She exhaled, her lips curving into a soft, teasing smirk. "Fine," she whispered, "but only if you admit something first." Leon arched an eyebrow. "And what's that?" She stepped forward, tilting her chin up. "That you've been obsessed with me since the moment we met." Leon's chuckle was low, dark. He leaned in, brushing his lips against hers. "Sweetheart," he murmured. "I never stood a chance." 1 year later, Leon Carter had everything. Power, wealth, control. And now he had her. His wife, his queen, his obsession. Natalie Carter sat across from him on their private estate, glowing in the morning sunlight, wearing his last name like a crown. And when she turned to him with that fire in her eyes, smirking like she knew she owned him just as much as he owned her, he smirked back, because she was his now, forever. And she didn't want to be anywhere else. He won. Chapter 21. Being Leon Carter's wife was a full-time job. And now she had another job, growing his heir. Natalie stood in the kitchen, barefoot, wearing one of Leon's silk shirts over her growing belly, flipping pancakes while humming softly. She should be exhausted. She was 6 months pregnant, after all. But instead, she felt peaceful, happy, completely his. The sound of footsteps behind her made her smile. Then, 2 strong arms wrapped around her waist, a warm, familiar presence pressing against her back. Leon, his lips brushed against her shoulder, his hands sliding over her belly, possessive, protective. "Morning, sweetheart," he murmured, his voice husky from sleep. Natalie rolled her eyes. "It's almost noon, Leon." His chuckle rumbled against her skin. "I didn't get much sleep last night." Her cheeks flushed, because she knew exactly why. Leon hadn't let her sleep. Apparently, pregnancy made her irresistible to him, and last night, he had proven it. Repeatedly, she bit her lip, flipping the pancake before he distracted her again. "You need to eat," she scolded, pretending to be annoyed. Leon hummed, nuzzling her neck. "I'd rather eat you." Natalie swatted at him. "Leon!" His deep chuckle sent shivers down her spine. Then he turned her slowly, tilting her chin up to meet his gaze. "You're glowing," he murmured. Her heart melted. He had been like this since the moment she told him she was pregnant. Obsessive, protective, overwhelming. And now? Now he looked at her like she was his entire world. Natalie smirked, pressing a hand to her belly. "You did this to me." Leon's lips curled, "and I'd do it again." Her breath caught, because she knew he meant it. This man, he would never stop claiming her, never stop owning her. And the worst part, she wanted that. Forever. Leon Carter had never cared about legacy, until now. Until her. Until his child growing inside of her. His heir, his obsession. Every time he looked at her belly, at the proof of what they had created together, something deep, primal, possessive burned inside of him. She was his. And now she was carrying his future. He had spent years controlling everything. But this was the one thing he never wanted to control. The one thing that had happened naturally. Because Natalie wasn't just his wife, she was his weakness, and he would spend the rest of his life proving that to her. Leon cupped her face, his thumb tracing her lower lip. "You love me," he murmured. Natalie rolled her eyes. "God, Leon, we're married. I think that's obvious." He smirked. "Say it again." She sighed dramatically. Then she leaned in, pressing a slow, teasing kiss against his lips. "I love you," Leon growled. And then, before she could escape, he lifted her into his arms, carrying her straight to the bedroom. Because if she was going to give him an heir, she might as well get used to being worshipped. The end. Written by Maria. Thank you all for taking the time to dive into this story with me. Your love and support mean everything, and I truly appreciate each and every one of you. This journey wouldn't be the same without you, and I'm so grateful to share these stories with such amazing readers. Stay tuned for more passion, more love, and more unforgettable moments. Until next time, see you in the next one. With love, always, Maria.